Hello, I hope you're sitting comfortably. We're going to look at the interview that Posie Parker, Kellie-Jay Keen, was interviewed on Julia Hartley-Brewer's programme, and Mr. James Max was standing in for Julia. I've never heard of him. Apparently he was on The Apprentice. Let's listen.
It does look as if, although JK Rowling hasn't been entirely eradicated, she has been sort of somewhat cleansed of this. Should she be invited in person, or because of her views on trans rights and transgender issues, and that being at variance to many of the stars who were in the films that she spawned?
Hang on. Is he saying should she be excluded because some of her views aren't the same as some of the views of some of the actors that portrayed the characters in a story that she created? I don't understand how this works. Is this how the modern workplace works? Is this how theatre works? This is madness. This is madness. If you don't agree with a writer, you are free to refuse to perform in any of her works. You know, that is your choice. But you don't get to tell the writer to write something different that you agree with. That's not how any of this works.
Maybe it was right to keep her away.
Maybe it was right to keep her away. Lest we forget, we're talking about the 20-year celebration of the Harry Potter books, the most successful series of books ever written in the English language. I think she's, the best seller of books. I mean, she's an extraordinary woman, and it's an extraordinary cultural creation. The generation of children that grew up with Harry Potter, what a fantastic gift she gave to all of those children. Why should she be excluded from a celebration of Harry Potter? It's her thing. She wrote it. She thought of everything. Every single word that came out of the mouths of those characters was written by JK Rowling. It wasn't due to their views on this, that, or the other. They were repeating words that she had written down on a piece of paper that they were given to learn to then say while they filmed it. That's what a film is. It's just madness.
I think it's quite despicable that she's been kept away, to be honest. I mean, they've said in this Independent story that she's been included, but she hasn't. We knew that the footage was going to be used from previous sort of years, so she's still been omitted. I think it's just despicable. It's her entire world, her idea, her talent, her brain that invented this entire story. I can't imagine the thinking, the meeting where they decided that she should be excluded.
I mean, I sympathise with that, trying to see the other side, and the other side would be she's such an influential person, she's such an influential individual that if she comes up with views, then the torrent, if you like, of abuse that can then be landed at the feet of those who are trans.
The torrent of abuse because of her views. I mean, bearing in mind, this is because she wrote an essay talking about her experiences as a survivor of domestic violence and how she really appreciated single-sex spaces as part of her recovery from that violence, and how she thought it was important for sports, how she thought it was important for a range of different reasons for women to retain their rights to single-sex spaces. The woman didn't say anything that doesn't accord with the views of the vast majority of the population. A very niche political view has been pushed through our schools and our institutions to this degree of prominence, which is not due to its widespread support.
Because of the views that she holds, means that it makes it very difficult for them.
I don't think understanding biology and knowing what a woman is brings abuse on anybody. I don't really see that the truth is responsible for abuse. And I don't think that anything she said would, even the most terrible of human, would be able to interpret what she said into something that meant people should just.
I don't know if you can see this. I'm watching the video along with listening, and while Kellie-Jay Keen is talking, the expressions that this Mr. Max is making are so disapproving. He's like doing the frown, he's got downturned mouth. The timestamp in this video is 1:46, and he has actually started to flick through a newspaper rather than listen to what she's saying.
Discriminate against anybody. She simply defended women, and I think that's a really brilliant point of view, and one that most of the country holds. It's just simply not
but
true.
It doesn't necessarily make it right, because I would stand up for her right to speak out. I wouldn't necessarily agree with her views on the matter of trans issues, because but then what do I know? But here, for example, in the papers today, and I think it is worth just picking it out, because it's one of those stories that, when one sees it, that we're talking about somebody whose life was pretty much cancelled because they were born a man, and then they transitioned and became a woman, became a model, and as soon as they were found out, they were outed about it.
I don't know what this story relates to. I'll have to look it up.
They passed away, and yet it's.
So it's a model who's a man. I mean, I tell you what, there are a large number of intersex women who are intersex XY women who have an inactive SRY gene, which means that they never go down the male developmental pathway. They default to a simulacrum of a female developmental pathway, and they don't usually find out that there's anything different until when they reach the age of menarche, and they don't start their periods, and they go to the doctors to find out why. And that may be the first time that they find out that they are actually an XY female, a very rare type of female. But those particular females who are actually male in terms of their chromosomes, but they lack that key gene that sends them down the male developmental route, they are found in high numbers in catwalk models, because they tend to develop as a kind of a lanky, skinny kind of woman with kind of narrow hips and the general look that models go for. So I'll look this story up, because I wonder what exactly went on there.
Well, sort of, it's still a sort of major story that, if there is discrimination in this way, then it can have a terrible effect on somebody's life.
What's that got to do with JK Rowling saying that women are adult human females and deserve rights?
Absolutely.
What?
I mean, it's a different conversation. It is an interesting conversation, but it's a different conversation, and it doesn't deserve to be shoved in the middle of this conversation, which he's not listening to.
What has that model got anything to do with JK Rowling? If somebody says that they're a female and they're not, and they get found out, then they've been dishonest. Does it mean that they should lose their livelihood? Absolutely not, depending on obviously what that job is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the moment there's a campaign. You can follow the work of Keep Prisons Single Sex. There's a campaign at the moment for men that have a female gender identity who work as prison guards. There's a movement to enable those men to conduct intimate searches on female prisoners on the basis that they have the same gender. And, female prisoners do not want to be searched by male guards that have decided to be called Brenda and wear a skirt. They want to be searched by female guards. I mean, it's a humiliating procedure. It's sadly necessary in prisons. But, women have human rights, including the right to being seen by a female doctor or searched by a female prison guard.
But no, I don't really understand how that's got anything to do with JK Rowling.
Well, it's got everything to do with it, because if, for example, you have a look at the discrimination that does arrive at people. So this individual here, born as George Jameson, transitioned and then became a model, and then when she was exposed as having been originally born as a man as opposed to the woman that she portrayed, then her life was kind of over and the discrimination started. And I guess it is.
How was her life?
I mean, the fashion industry, so many people are chewed up and spat out by the fashion industry. I don't know the details of this, but it's the normal thing for models. For whatever reason, you know, you have a bad day and a director takes against you and then you get no more bookings. Or, you know, you're on your period and you're a little bit bloated and it's a bit more difficult to fit in the clothes and you get no more bookings. I mean, it's normal for things to happen that mean that you no longer are on that path to becoming a top model, the next Kate Moss. I mean, there's only one Kate Moss. I mean, there are a bunch of models that have done really well, but you know, even the best models, it's a job with a shelf life. You've got to be planning your exit strategy from the time you enter.
How is his life over?
Well, do you call him or her?
Totally him.
You see, that's the problem, because they were born a man and then they became a woman, so they could never be her.
How can you become a woman?
Absolutely, I don't think any man can ever become a woman. No.
So then there's the problem, isn't it?
What? Not lying.
Well, it's not a question of not lying. It's a question of not necessarily.
It is a question of not lying. We've been coerced to believe that the polite, the decent, the civilized thing is to lie to people, to collude in this fantasy life that they want to lead. And it's never kind to lie. It's never kind to lie.
Really understanding that somebody can be born in somebody else's body, in the sense that you can be born
Even mermaids have stopped saying you can be born in somebody else's body. You can't be born in somebody else's body. You are your body. You have your own body. Whose body are you born in if you're not born in your own body? And where's their mind at? Like, who have you displaced? Are they floating around? It's just nonsense. It's just nonsense. But it is a protected religious belief. If you want to have that belief, that's absolutely fine. I mean, it's no less ridiculous than many other religious beliefs. If you want to believe that there are gender souls inhabiting people, and that you can have somehow got the wrong gender soul in a body, that's a protected religious belief. You know, I'll fight to defend your right to that belief. But the flip side is that we also have the right not to engage in that belief, and we can't be compelled to act as if we believe in your religious beliefs.
A man or a woman, but inside you may be, and it has been recognised that you might yourself be an opposing sex in terms of how your brain works. Are you saying?
Okay. I mean, it's too complicated to go into the whole thing, but there, you know, brain sex is nonsense. There is no way that a man can somehow think like a woman, because the man is doing the thinking, therefore the thinking he is doing is like a man. He might be thinking about subjects that women often think about. He might form opinions that are more concerned with female interests. He might have personality characteristics which are stereotypically feminine. He's not thinking like a woman. He's thinking like a man that has feminine interests. And that is fine. That's okay. You don't have to be the most macho man. You can be a feminine man. It's very attractive, actually.
That person should be discriminated against for the rest of their life because of the physicality of it?
No.
Discriminated against? Define this discrimination.
I'm saying what you just said there is absolute nonsense. There's no way that you can be... You are your body. There is no separation between your biological sex.
No, you see, I'm afraid that's wrong.
Okay, once again, looking at the body language here, he's kind of holding his head in his hands, he's kind of shaking his head to indicate that she's wrong, he's frowning, his body language is hostile. This has become a hostile interview, where he thinks that he is defending what is right, and that she is somehow speaking the unspeakable truths. It has not been this. He believes in gender nonsense, which is a religious belief, and it's a very popular religious belief amongst the middle class, the intelligentsia, the kind of London elites, Not surprised he has these beliefs, because there are many people who are influential who have indicated that these beliefs are necessary in order to progress in certain circles. And you know, it's better to go along to get along. So I'm sure he feels that he's defending something which he's obligated to defend.
No. In what possible way would the DNA of a human build all the cells one sex, except a tiny little bit of a brain that would be a different sex?
Well, that's not necessarily. I mean, are you an expert in this?
Oh, he's just been saying about, oh, well, people are born in the wrong body. He's just been spouting a load of nonsense. And then he's saying, are you an expert in the fact that DNA builds bodies and the sex is in every cell of your body? Every cell that has a nucleus. Red blood cells don't have a sex because they don't have a nucleus and they don't have chromosomes in them. But, I mean, by and large, every cell in your body is male or female.
Well, I'd probably say I was more of an expert than somebody who thinks you can actually.
Well, you're just telling me that you're an expert because you're female, and therefore.
No, you use the word expert. I didn't use the word expert. You did.
Yeah. Well, you're telling.
Again, with a dismissive body language.
That you can't possibly, but you have no expertise to back it up. Whereas doctors who are experts will say that people can be born. And I mean, do you accept?
No, Which doctors are these? Weberly? Harrop?
Don't say that. People who are invested, medical professionals who are invested in the industry, might well suggest that there is such a thing as being born in the wrong body. Doctors who actually care about patients and truth and honesty don't say such things.
Okay, let's just establish something. Can you be born gay?
I think there are two routes to homosexuality, according to someone like Sheila Jeffreys. You can either be born gay or you can choose to be gay.
I think this is fabulous. I really do. I mean, when do you see lesbian feminism getting an airing on mainstream broadcast media? That's the genius of Posie Parker. You know, a lot of radical feminists have issues with Posie Parker, but credit where it's due. You know, she's representing the incredible work of Sheila Jeffreys here on the broadcast media. You know, this is a significant thing to talk about. Back again.
You can choose to be gay.
Well, yeah, that's according to people who have written about it. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, you'd probably have to survey the entire population of gay people. I certainly know some gay people who don't think they were born gay, and I know plenty that do.
Right.
I mean, I think you know, this is a really contentious discussion within the gay population, within lesbian populations, and within feminism, because there are very polarised views about this situation. But you know, it's undoubtedly true that although a large number of women say we were born lesbians, we never had any attraction to men, this is who we were born as, there are a significant number of women, particularly during the second wave, who discovered their lesbianism through their political activity and believed that through recentering their lives around women, they developed or uncovered a level of erotic attraction towards women which was not immediately evident when they embarked upon their dating lives. So there are two distinct routes to becoming a member of the lesbian community. One is through the kind of born this way mantra, and one is through political lesbianism. It's contentious, but she's absolutely bang on the money.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, and so you don't think that you could be born female, but in fact, in terms of how you operate, you are a man?
No, I think you can probably be born any sex and behave in any way, and that doesn't really change your biological structure.
But isn't that because you are certain on who you are, in the sense that I'm pretty certain on who I am, and therefore we can come at this subject with the knowledge and the experience that we have? But you can never be in the body, in the mind, in the brain of somebody else. And in fact, by saying the things that you're saying is pretty hateful, pretty disturbing.
Okay, so suddenly it's hateful and disturbing. to believe that there are two biological sexes and that it's not possible to truly change from one sex to another sex in the higher mammals such as humans. That's not hateful, that's not bigotry, it's a legally protected belief. You know, it's absolutely fine to believe in gender souls, that's a protected belief too, but it's also fine not to. You know, I mean, people don't, I mean, he has engaged in all sorts of debates about COVID and lockdowns and all the rest of it. He doesn't say to people, well, it's hateful if you think differently about Brexit or COVID or whatever. It's just this issue makes you hateful.
How is it hateful? I think what you're saying is pretty hateful towards women, actually, that somebody can just rock up and decide.
This is what I love about Kellie-Jay. She doesn't miss a beat, she turns it back round on him immediately, and that is unusual because women are socialised to be agreeable and to make nice, and somehow that socialisation didn't take with Kellie-Jay. She is much more upfront than the vast majority of women, and it makes her perfect for these kind of media appearances.
To change.
They don't decide.
Of course they do.
No, you see, that's the problem. That's the problem. You're assuming that they do, whereas I'm saying, I don't know. I'm not an expert in this, and I'm not somebody, and therefore, I am unsure. But people tell me who have gone through transitioning, it's probably the most difficult thing to.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is really difficult actually, because firstly, you're talking about regularly poisoning your body with chemicals that it's not designed to metabolize, and that's going to create problems. Some people are going to pursue surgeries which have a really uncertain success rate, and the complications can be life-changing and not in a good way. And there are rare occasions where these interventions result in a psychologically content person who goes on to have a happy life. But, you know, we see that psychiatric diagnoses, criminality, all of these things don't tend to change in this population of people who actually become more likely to perform acts of self-harm post transition. So what we're providing for this population of people isn't working. And I think that is something which you know, our opponents in the debate assume that we're all hateful and we hate everybody and we want people to die. No, I actually think you deserve a lot better than what you're getting at the moment. I think what you're getting at the moment doesn't serve your interests. And I would be keen if we were able to research, you know, how can we make it better for you without having to undergo all this extensive but very profitable medical intervention.
To face, to confront, to deal with. And because of the views of people like you, it means that they are facing discrimination at
views of people like you means you face. I think the discrimination he's talking about here is like when women say to their husband, no, I don't agree to be lesbians with you. Because I can't think of any other instance in which women have this power to discriminate. Even if we see somebody in the women's toilets that we believe to be a man and believe has no place there, it's a very unusual woman that would actually say something in that situation. I mean, British society generally, we don't tend to create conflict with strangers. We tend to just ignore things if we can. Talk about the weather, offer them a cup of tea maybe, but we certainly don't tend to initiate conflict with strangers unless there are extreme circumstances. So I can't imagine what discrimination they're talking about apart from words that we say or write on the internet.
Return, and you're making their lives worse.
How are we making their lives worse? How? We're saying this is a nonsense. You can't become what we are because we're different, and we can see that you're not the same as us. We can see that we're different. That's not discrimination, that's just recognising reality.
I don't want men in women's spaces, and I don't care how those men identify. So it's up to everybody, however they want to live their lives, that's fine. But when it impeaches upon my life...
How does it impinge on your life?
Well, if I want to go in a female-only space and there's men in there who decide that they're women, then it's no longer a female-only space, is it?
But then men were told that they wanted to have men-only spaces, and then they were told that that was discrimination. They weren't allowed to do it.
So are men more unsafe now they can't have the...
So this is a standard men's rights activist talking point where they say, well, you wanted equality, so here we go. This is what equality means. We weren't allowed to keep our gentlemen's clubs, and therefore you're not allowed sex segregated spaces for reasons of safety. And it's not a very fair argument. Gentlemen's clubs were opportunities for men to talk about politics, to make business deals, to generally run society in a way where women were excluded from that entire arena. So there was absolutely no danger of any women's viewpoints seeping in there. There's none of our shrill, loud voices. It was just men talking about what things to do, wars to wage, and all the rest of it. And feminists said, you know, this isn't on. We're not talking about the single sex spaces. I mean, men's changing rooms should be for men. Women should not be going in there. You know, men have a right to privacy too. But men are not at risk from female violence in the way that women are at risk from male violence. That's the key difference, isn't it?
Golf clubs.
It's not a question of safe. It's just that it's cake and eat it, isn't it?
Well, it is for women.
Right.
It is a question of safety for women. We are much
What, so
less
all men are predators?
unisex spaces. No, not all men. Just the one. Some are, and we don't know which ones they are. That's why we have segregated.
So he's actually shaking his head here, because she's saying not all men are predators, but some are, and he is hearing all men are predators, and that's not what she's saying. But he repeats this later, doesn't he?
Spaces.
Right.
He shakes his head.
I mean, isn't it better that we try and train all people to be a little bit more respectful to each other?
Of course it
Well,
is.
when we don't have any men committing sexual assault, rape, and domestic violence, then I will totally agree with you that we could do that. But until that happens, I'm afraid.
So women don't commit those crimes as well?
No,
Not at the rate of men, no. As they certainly don't commit rape.
Right. Okay. I am slightly staggered by your views on the base.
What's staggering about those views? They're really moderate feminist views. I mean, I don't know. Has the needle swung so back, the pendulum swung so far back that this is now positioned as extreme? Because what she's saying is that men and women are different. Male violence is a thing. We name the problem, and one of our mediating solutions is to provide single-sex spaces for women for reasons of privacy, safety and dignity that are protected in law. These arguments were had decades ago. This has been resolved. This is not new information. And it is not hateful, and it is not bigoted, and it is dishonest. It is misleading for this individual to be claiming otherwise.
Is that...
The biological sex.
I may have to change my mind. Maybe it was right that if you take those views, maybe you should be cancelled.
If you take those views, maybe you should be cancelled, he said. The home of free speech.
Wow. You're on talk radio, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you think people should be cancelled for having a view?
No, I don't think they should be. I don't think people should be cancelled, and I would like people to have different views. But it's just I find it staggering that you would want to have this kind of discrimination perpetrated against people who are born different from you.
No, I want men out of women's spaces. That's not born different. That's a biological fact, and that biological fact determines whether or not somebody is a risk to women.
And is it okay if men? Okay, all right, fine. No, I understand. No, I understand. So, is it okay if men said that they wanted women out of their spaces? Is that all right?
Do you mean like private spaces, like toilets and places where men might undress?
Might be.
Well, absolutely. Of course, women shouldn't be in those spaces.
Okay, and what about other places?
Like what?
I don't know.
Like what
Bars,
places?
restaurants, or anything else? I mean, should we just go back to segregated society?
The reason feminists of old decided that they wanted to eradicate some of those men-only spaces is because in those corridors of power, that's where important conversations were taking place, and women, by not being allowed in those spaces, were out of the conversation. That is a very different thing than wanting to keep men out of women's spaces, like when women are undressing. I mean, I'll ask you the age-old question. Does my 15-year-old daughter have the right to go in a female-only space and expect there only to be females?
But if there are only females, if somebody is or has transitioned, then they are a female.
Well, 90% of...
No, they're not. No, they're not. Female is defined as relating to the sex that has the ability to produce large gametes, to gestate and bear and nurture young. We all know what a woman is because we all came out of one. It's not the same.
Men that say they transition have no intention of taking hormones or losing their genitals. And so, as far as I'm concerned, you don't transition anywhere. There's no such thing. Nobody ever changes from one sex to another. But certainly what we're talking about predominantly with men is men over the age of 40 deciding that they want to dress as women. It's what we used to call transvestites. And so this whole transgender just totally loses the fact of what